One of the questions that we're asked frequently is, how do I use ALMComplete for my Agile setups? So this demonstration is going to talk about that specifically. We're going to talk about how to set your sprints up. We're going to talk about user stories and setting up user story points. We'll talk about themes and epics. We'll talk about how to best manage your projects. We'll also talk a little bit about test management for Agile, as well as defect management. So let's get started. All of this is going to start here in the Releases tab. In the Releases tab, you can organize your releases by product line. Right now you can see that I have 3 product lines over here. If I expand the second one here, the Orders application, I created a release 1 in there. So anytime you're creating a new release to one of these product lines, you'll click on the product line itself, you'll press Add, and then you'll type in the name of the release. So if you're working on Release 2, you would put that in here. You can also have a status. You can have estimated start and finishes. Normally for a release that's going to have sprints in it, I'll leave those blank and choose to automatically adjust the estimated dates. I can assign it to a Scrum Master, and then I can put a nice little description here that tells what we're delivering in this release. And once you have a release defined, I'll go over to this Release 1, you can then define your sprints. And since sprints are normally time boxed, you'll normally want to create specific dates for those. How you create a sprint is you go over to the release, you press the plus sign here, and then you add an iteration. And from here, I would then lock in the start date. So if you're doing a 3-week sprint or something like that, you can put in those dates here. No problem there. You can also describe your sprint here. That'll come out on some nice release reports for you. If you are doing a build to production and you want to track any defects that are associated with that build, instead of creating a sprint for that, you can come in here and you can create a build. And it works very similar to the iterations or sprints. You can time box them if you want. You don't have to, but you can link artifacts to those. So that's really the first step, is setting up those releases. So now let's talk about user story setup and defining story points. In ALMComplete, requirements in user stories are the same. They're analogous. So a couple of things that you'll want to understand about requirements or user stories is they're all housed in this requirements area. And if you want to define specific user stories for a specific release, you will go to the Releases tab of the requirements. You'll navigate down to the release you're working in. Let's say that I'm working here in Sprint 2. And then you can go into this folders area and you can start to organize your user stories into functional areas. So for example, this Orders application has several different functional areas here, but in this particular sprint we're going to work on reporting, and you'll see that all of our requirements or user stories are here for reporting. Now if I go back over to the releases and look at all of the releases, come back over to folders, you'll see there's a lot of different user stories in all these different categories here. They're just not tied to this second sprint. If I come back over here, you'll see only these 4 are tied to this second sprint. Now another thing that's convenient when you're defining user stories is to have a template for the description. Notice when I come and press Add New, it automatically fills in a template for my description that looks like a user story. It says, as a type of user, I want some goal so that some reason. This was automatically defined for us over in the setup area. So to do that, you go into setup, you go into system configuration, you go into screen layouts, and then you choose requirements. Then you'll see an area called default values. Default values for description, as you can see, is where I entered in that. So if I come here, press on that, you can see that I've entered that in, and that will be the default value when you're adding a new requirement. The other thing that's important is a lot of Agile teams really want to collect only the needed information for a user story, and they don't want any other field on the screen. They just really want to make it lean and easy to use. You can change that behavior over here on the Add Edit screen. So if there are fields here that you don't really care about, for example, maybe you don't care about keywords here, you can take that off. Maybe you don't care about acceptance criteria or business rules, you can take those off. Any of this stuff that you don't care about, simply come in and take that information out, and it won't display on the screen. So once this is updated, I go back over to the requirement screen, I press Add New. You'll see that it's limited what I'm showing here on the screen now. Now the next thing I want to talk about is story points. By default, the requirements area doesn't have a field called story points. You do see that we do have a field here called story points on the screen, and we've defined them as 1 through 4 values. We did that by coming into the custom fields area and defining a new field called story points, and then we provided the values right here. So whatever you use for your story points, whether it's chocolate bars or 1 through 10 or 1 through 100, really doesn't matter. You can come in here and define story points, and you can define the choice list values, and you can also specify, while we were over in that screen layout area earlier, you might have noticed that you could rearrange the fields. I decided to have my story points right next to the priority. You can rearrange these fields if you like to do that. The final thing I'd like to say about this as well is that many times you'll have product backlog. You'll have a list of requirements that you might include in a specific sprint. I normally will create a folder underneath the product line here called product backlog, and then I'll put any of our incoming requirements that we might want to get to, or user stories that we might want to get to, into that product backlog. You can use the fast edit feature here to drag and drop them out of the product backlog into the right folder for this release once you decide that you really do want to do those items. Alright, so we talked about user story setup and story points. Now let's talk about themes and epics. Some teams will track user stories and they don't really care about themes or epics. Some teams really like themes and epics. If you're not familiar with that, a theme is kind of an overarching area of the software that you're developing. An epic is normally a specific feature that you're developing, and then user stories, you'll have 1 or more user stories that make up an epic, and those will be individual stories that detail out how the functionality is going to work for that particular epic. So if you want to track themes and epics, there's a number of different ways you can do it with our tool, but I'll demonstrate one that I think would work nicely for you. Now you can see over here that I have organized underneath my product line the different functional areas. So some people would argue that those are actually themes, and you could use that for your themes if you wanted to do that. Within each one of these, you can see I have a client listing report, adding MS Word, etc. You could kind of argue that those are epics as well. But if you want to get down to that lower level of user story, you can do that. So how I would recommend you do it is either create a custom field called theme/epic and have those names in there, or you could use our built-in grouping feature to do that. And I'll show you both approaches. You can decide which one you like best. So let's imagine that we just want to create a custom field for it. Well, to do that, we can go into Actions here and we can choose Manage Custom Fields. Once we're here, we can come down and we can define it. So we'll call it theme/epic, and then we'll make this a choice list of values. So for this orders application, let's say that our themes were batch processing, file operations, so we'll first set up our themes. As you can see, I've defined the themes here. At this point, we might also want to show our epics, so I will probably do something like this. I will start to break this down into different epics. Okay, so as you can see, I've defined the theme here. I put a little divider here, and I put the epic right next to it. You can see that I've done that for each one of the areas. I'll go ahead and press Submit. So now when I come into these user stories, I can choose that theme or epic. Now notice that the theme and epic is way down here on the bottom of the page. I really don't like that. I would like that to be right next to group here. I can go change that. I'll go into Setup, choose System Configuration, Screen Layouts, Requirements, come over to the Add Edit screen, and I'm going to take that new theme and epic and I'm just going to move that right on up underneath group. Once that's done, I'll come back over to the requirements and you'll see that it's moved it. So in this case, we have a client listing report, so that's really a report that's going to be an ad hoc report. So you can see how we can see the theme here as well as the epic. I can move on to the next one, and I can see the theme and epic for this one is add MS Word capability. That's going to be a crystal report type deal. Same thing with Excel, and same thing with this. It's going to be ad hoc. All right. So how can we see that information? Well, we can first see it on the screen if we wish. We can click Choose Fields, and we can choose to show the theme in Epic. All right. We'll take that and we'll put it right here next to the title. So now we can very easily see the theme in Epic right here. Another way we can see it is we can come over to our groups and then we can group by it. So we can say, well, let's look at all of our user stories, but we want to look at them by theme in Epic first. And then within the theme in Epic, we may want to look at the status of those or some other thing here, and then we can very easily look at that as well, and then click into that area and you can see those items right here. Now, I alluded to the fact earlier that there's another way to do it. We do have a built-in field called group that you might have noticed here. You could have put those same values in the group area right here and used it that way. And you could have went over into the choice list values here. In fact, I can do that. I can come here and copy out all that theme and Epic stuff and put over here in the grouping and save that. If I do that, it'll work the same way as a built-in field, but it'll be called group rather than theme and Epic. Really, the only advantage of that is that we do have a dashboard over here that will show you analytics by group. You could, of course, create a custom dashboard based on that custom field you created. But this is a nice little feature here. Is this requirements by group here? You can come here and look at all of your requirements, and then you can analyze them by that group. So if this were done by theme and Epic, you would see some nice little graphs here. But again, if you have the on-premises edition, you can develop your own dashboards based on that custom field, so that's not a problem either. Okay, so we've talked about sprint setup, we've talked about user story setup and story points, we've talked about themes and epics. Now let's talk about project management. As you begin developing stories, you're going to have people working on tasks, and you want to make sure that they're logging their time towards tasks and reforecasting the estimated time remaining so that you can get just some good dashboards and burn downs, velocity, and that kind of thing. So you can use our tool for all of that, obviously. Now, where we'll start with this is we'll do this over in the project management area. Now, there are two different ways to approach project management, and it really depends on what you're trying to accomplish as to which one you would want to choose to use. I'll describe them briefly here. We have this area called project plans, and it works similar to like a Microsoft project where you can go in and create a project plan. Here's a Sprint 2 project plan, for example. You can bring items from your requirements or the user stories into here, and then you can decompose those down into tasks that people work on, and you can estimate the hours out separately, and then you can assign them to various people on your team. You can also link those back up to one of those releases over here. You can see I have this one linked over to Sprint 2. And this works nicely in the fact that you can create a set of these things. You can move them in here hierarchically. Other things that you can do with that is you can see them over here on a team task board. So this will show you for any release or sprint you're working on what items are in your to-do list, what things are in progress, what things are completed. One of the other big benefits of this feature is that as you develop tasks, you can link tasks to a project plan. So you can see that this requirement here, this client listing report, has some project plan tasks, and you can see this under the task area, and it keeps those two in sync. So if you were to create a user story, you put it under a project plan, decompose that down into tasks, you would see those tasks here, and as people work on it, it would show their percentage complete, estimated remaining, all that kind of stuff right here. So that's a big advantage of the project plan approach. Now, of course, you'll also get a number of nice little dashboards that show you burn down charts, estimated hours completed. You'll see some velocity and some slipping tasks here as well. So that is a good way to do it. Now, we have talked to a number of Agile teams that don't want anything close to Microsoft Project. They don't like the fact that this is hierarchical. They just want to be able to have a list of tasks and work them in the order that they wish, put them in a backlog, and have teams work on that. So if you are opposed to this hierarchical project management and this more structured way of doing it, you can use our Agile Tasks feature for that. So in the Agile Tasks feature, it kind of works like our defects feature or our requirements feature, where you can come into this area. You can link these tasks up to a specific release. I can come here and set myself on a release here, and it'll show me any tasks that I have for that release. I don't happen to have any for that one. And then you can organize your tasks here into folders. So imagine these being your user stories or your epics, and then having a list of stories or a list of tasks associated with that. So here in this purge processing, I have a number of different tasks. I have some user interface tasks, some database tasks, some business object tasks, etc. You'll also see that I built a folder here for task backlog. These are things that aren't assigned to anybody, and anybody can go in and take those items as they want to do that. So working with this is very similar to the rest of the tool. You can come in, you can press add, you can fill in the details of the task, you can put estimated hours in here. You can also put in estimated start and finish dates if you want to. It's not required. You can even tie these back to requirements by linking them back up to a requirement. We have some other really good movies that explain both the project plans and the Agile tasks out on our website. So I'm not going to go into that much detail here, but I just wanted to make sure that you knew that we had a couple of ways of doing it. Now, by using Agile tasks, you don't give up anything. In other words, you don't give up the ability to manage your tasks on a team task board. You can still come here to your team task board, look at a particular sprint that you're working on, and you can see all of the Agile tasks that are associated with that particular release. And you can also look at other people's tasks. If I want to look at Rick's tasks or Barry's tasks or everybody's tasks, I can see everything right here from one place. So you're not giving up anything there either. You're also not giving anything up on the dashboard either, because there's an Agile Tasks tab here that has burn downs and the other types of things that you see here for project plans. Really, the only advantage of the project planning area is some people like the structure of this hierarchy here, so they like the project plans area. On the Agile Tasks area, you don't have that level of hierarchy, so it really depends on what you're trying to accomplish. All right, the next area here is test management setup. There really isn't a lot of difference between how you manage your tests for an Agile development shop as compared to a waterfall development shop, but it is important to understand how you link your tests back to a sprint. So I'll talk about that. Over in the test management area, there's this area called the test library, and this is where you're going to keep all of your reusable tests, and you can organize them along functional lines here. So I can see that I have some for reporting, some for order maintenance. You can also see here that you can create configurations, and configurations are simply different operating systems and browsers, or maybe it's embedded devices, whatever. You can define any number of these configurations. You can also organize them. I can see here that I have a number of Windows 7 configurations, a number of XP configurations, etc. So once you have your library and you have your configurations defined, you can then create test sets. And this is going to contain a list of tests that you're going to run for some specific reason. So you can tie those to a release by coming into this Releases tab, setting yourself on the release, going over into the folders, and then adding these test sets in whatever folder structure you want. A lot of people will divide their regression tests from their functional tests, and they'll have those here. So you can see here I have a test set called Test Reporting, and it's going to test ad hocs, on-demand, as well as crystal reports. These are some tests that live in the library. All right. Now, when you're editing that test set, how you want to tie that back to a specific release or sprint is slide down to the bottom, and there's a little area called Releases, and you can see I have this one tied to Sprint 2, Release 1. If I wanted to tie this over to Sprint 3 as well, you just press Link to Items. You would choose Releases here. All right, you would choose the orders application, and then you would say, yep, I want to also tie that over into my third sprint as well. And now this test set can be run in either one of those sprints. You can also see that I've defined this set of tests to run in these three browser configurations as well. Now when you run these tests, press Run here. It'll ask you what release you want to run it under. If you only created one release there or one sprint, it would automatically fill that in, but since I have a couple here, it allows you to choose. So if I wanted to run this one under Sprint 3, I would choose Sprint 3. Then I would use the configuration. Maybe I'm going to run it under Windows XP i9, go into Run Mode, and then begin your run. So this is going to show us all of the tests that you're going to be running, It'll also show you the average run time for each one of those, so you can kind of get an idea of how long it's going to take to run them. Press run, that'll get you into run mode. If everything passes here, you can pass all the steps. If you ever get confused about what the requirement should be while you're testing, you'll see that the requirement is linked here, and I can click on that user story and look at that a little bit more detail here, figure out what I'm looking for in the test. I can continue on, I can pass all these, go to the next one. If you do have one that fails here, one of the really nice Agile things here is that rather than having to create a defect manually, we can automatically spawn a defect whenever you fail the test. Another big advantage too is being able to attach a movie that shows what happened during your test process. For that, we use a third-party tool called Jing. If you're not familiar with it, go out to www.jingproject.com, jingproject.com, and it has a little recorder that integrates with ALMComplete. So you can use Jing to highlight the area of the page that you want to record. So let's say that we wanted to record a movie that shows the developer what bug we're having here. All right. So in this scenario, we're going to open up a file, and we're going to come here to the report, and we want to run a crystal report, but it's not giving us that option, so that's the bug. So I can stop that recording, and it'll create a movie. Then I can upload that to either Screencast or my local FTP. I'll choose my local FTP there, and it'll upload that. Once it's done, it'll tell you that capture's been sent. Then in the actual result, you can simply just say, see this movie. You can right click and choose paste. It'll use Jing's copy buffer to paste that movie right in. So that's a very agile way of doing things. That way the developer doesn't go through a lot of retesting cycles. You press next here, you press next there, it'll show that we failed the test, and it'll ask if you want to generate a defect automatically. Sure, let's do that. Notice it fills in the information here. You can also set the priority and set the assignment information. Notice that it's automatically filled in all the steps to reproduce, and there's the movie as well. In fact, if I double click that, it'll bring the movie forward here. So that's a nice little feature that you can use during that process. Once you're done with that, go ahead and press submit, and then that will send that defect off to somebody. Once that's done, it'll show you a description of your run, show you what passed, what failed. It'll also show you how long each one of those took to run as well. All right, so that's how the test management piece works. Now, as you do these tests, you'll be able to come in and look at the run history, and it'll show you what release or sprint you ran these in. You can see that that one was run in sprint 3. It'll show you what configuration you ran it in, how long it took to run, what passed and failed. From a dashboard perspective, you'll be able to come into here and look at your dashboards by release. I'll come here to my test set here, so you can look at a given sprint here, and it'll analyze everything that just happened. You can also very quickly toggle between sprints. So it'll show you all your runs by assignee, by configuration, by test set, and other attributes there. So some pretty good release reporting information there. You'll also find that all of our reports are that way as well. If I come in here and I wanted to run, let's say, a user card story or something like that. If I wanted to come in here and look at all of our user story index cards, I can do that. I just come under Report, Requirement Reports. I press on User Index Cards. Oops, I need to choose a release here. I'll choose Release Sprint 1 here. And notice it'll show you all of your cards here, and it'll show you the user story information and the priority here as well. All right, so that's one thing you can do. You can also run all of these reports by release. So I can come in here and look at, let's say, all of my user stories by assignee. I can choose my current project, all my active releases here, and it'll break all of this information up by your Agile sprint, and it'll show this information graphically. I'm looking at the first sprint here. I'm looking at requirements by assignee or user stories by assignee. I can also see it at the project level here. I can page into it, and it'll start to give me all of the information about each one of those user stories as well. So nice printable format here. Okay, the final thing we want to talk about regarding managing your Agile projects is defect management. We showed you a little earlier how you can use the tool to manage your defects and automatically create those as you're testing. All of those defects show up here in the defects area, and when you're working with a specific release, you can come into here and you can choose the release that you're working on, and it'll show you just the defects for that release or that sprint. Okay, it'll show those over here. And if you want to see everything outside of that, you can go all the way up to the release level if you want. This is showing me everything for release 1 and all the sprints underneath it. I can also come into here and group this information. So I can say, well, show me that information, but show it to me by status. And then within the status, maybe I want to see who they're assigned to, and then within that, maybe I want to see what priority these defects are. So I can come in and choose that type of information. Now, it's still only showing me for information for release 1. As you can see here, I chose that from the releases area. So here I can see that I have 21 active items. It looks like Rick here has the majority of them. I can drill into that and see that all 9 of those are high priority items. I can drill into that, make any quick changes that I want to any of these items as well. All right, well, that covers a high-level overview of how you can use ALMComplete with Agile projects. I hope this is helpful for you. Thank you.